In the crystalline spires of Zephyrea Prime, where violet lightning stitched perpetual storms across the faces of 3 lavender moons and the ultra-wealthy breathed air laced with the distilled perfume of night-blooming Ragelian orchids, a small cobalt-skinned girl named Kyla Voss sat in perfect, absolute silence on a balcony of living glass that floated 800 meters above the capital's neon oceans. She was the only daughter of Ambassador Regent Ixathra Voss, the single richest being in the Orion Arm, owner of half the trade lanes between the core and the Perseus Rift, yet all the credits in known space could not buy her the one thing she had never possessed: the ability to hear. Court physicians spoke in hushed circles of catastrophic neural damage sustained in utero when the diplomatic shuttle carrying her pregnant mother had been sabotaged by corporate rivals. The blast had killed Lady Ceres instantly and rewritten the unborn child's auditory pathways into useless scar tissue. While alien aristocrats whispered behind jeweled fans about flawed genetics and the cruelty of fate, Kyla traced ever-shifting constellations in the cosmic dust that drifted past the balcony, her golden eyes reflecting storms no one else bothered to watch. She did not yet know that her salvation was already inside the same tower, guiding a low-humming sanitation drone with rough human hands that still remembered the exact weight of an 8-year-old boy slipping away beneath a yellow sun that no longer rose on Earth. Far below the perfumed executive levels, in corridors lit by harsh white utility strips, Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart past humming power conduits and the faint smell of recycled ozone. His features were unmistakably human: warm brown skin, black hair now threaded with premature silver at the temples, eyes the color of wet earth after rain, eyes that had not truly slept in 4 months. Tucked inside the breast pocket of his gray coveralls was a crumpled photograph he touched whenever the corridor was empty. A smiling boy with the same gentle mouth, taken 6 weeks before leukemia finally won. Marcus had taken this job because exhaustion was a kinder anesthetic than memory, because mopping floors until his back screamed left no energy for dreams of hospital rooms and the soft, final sigh of a child who had called him daddy until the very end. Yet tonight, as the service lift carried him upward through the restricted levels, he felt something he had not felt since the night Jonah died: a faint, inexplicable vibration beneath the deck plates, delicate as a heartbeat remembered across light years. On the 112th floor, Kyla had escaped her Alterian language tutor again. The instructor's sharp, frustrated footsteps had carried irritation the way thunder carries rain. Kyla felt both in the soles of her bare feet long before the woman realized her charge was gone. Now she sat cross-legged on the transparent floor of her father's private study, palms pressed flat against the smart glass, watching the city's light fracture into patterns only she could read. Her toys lay scattered and untouched, crystalline song spheres that chimed in frequencies forever beyond her reach, a miniature orchestra of wind bells that produced nothing but pretty vibrations against her skin. But Kyla understood the world differently. She tasted her father's anxiety in the way he disturbed the air when he paced. She sensed the emotional static left behind by every being who entered the tower, electromagnetic fingerprints only she could see. And now, rising through the building like a new note in a song she had never been allowed to hear, came a presence that felt gently, achingly sad yet impossibly kind. For the first time in her 6 years of life, Kyla felt someone whose grief resonated with her own silent frequency, whose sorrow carried not pity but recognition. Marcus reached the executive corridor and paused. Through the transparent wall of the ambassador's office he saw her, a tiny cobalt girl surrounded by treasures that meant nothing to her, gazing out at the storm as though trying to drink the lightning with her eyes. Their gazes locked across the glass, and something impossible happened. Marcus felt the hollow space where Jonah's laughter used to live suddenly fill with a different child's loneliness, yet the loneliness was not empty. It was full of wonder waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Kyla felt warmth bloom inside her chest like sunrise on a world she had never visited. The cleaning drone's soft hum became a lullaby only she could feel. What is the meaning of this? Ambassador Ixathra's voice cut through the air like a vibroblade. He stood in the doorway, silver rank marks blazing beneath his skin, eyes flashing between his daughter and the human custodian who had no business being this close to restricted levels. "Just finishing my rounds, Your Excellency," Marcus said, lowering his gaze out of habit rather than fear. "I meant no intrusion." "You were staring at my child," Ixathra snapped, and with a thought the wall opacified, shutting Marcus out. Inside the office, Kyla pressed both small palms against the darkened panel, searching for the warmth that had just vanished. Marcus should have walked away. Instead he raised his knuckles and tapped 3 times, soft, deliberate, The same 3 taps he had used in the hospital when words became too heavy for Jonah's failing lungs. The vibration traveled through alloy and crystal and into Kyla's bones like a promise. The door slid open again. Zixathra filled the frame, fury barely contained. "I believe I made myself clear. Your daughter looked lonely," Marcus said quietly, meeting the ambassador's eyes for the first time. "I know that look. You know nothing of her suffering. I know what it is to watch a child live in a world that feels cut off from everything that matters," Marcus replied, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "My son." Toward the end, words stopped working. "We learned new ones. Sometimes the most important conversations happen in silence." Zixathra's silver eyes narrowed, but something behind them flickered, recognition of a grief that wore different skin but carried the same unbearable weight. "Your son, Jonah. 8 years old. Gone 4 months now." Behind her father Kyla had crept closer, golden eyes fixed on Marcus's face with desperate intensity. She lifted one small hand and pressed it against the doorframe. Without thinking, Marcus mirrored the gesture, palm to empty air inches from hers. A ripple passed through the corridor lights, so faint only Kyla noticed, and something inside her chest opened like a flower that had waited 6 years for sunlight. Then Foreman Greel's chittering voice echoed from the lift, growing closer, threatening to shatter the fragile moment. Marcus stepped back, bowing slightly, and walked away with his cart, every step heavier than the one before. Days became weeks. Marcus found himself volunteering for extra shifts on the executive levels, telling himself it was for the overtime pay while knowing it was a lie. Zixathra could not erase the human's words from his mind. Each night he watched Kyla trace invisible patterns on window glass with new purpose, as though listening to music only she could see. Dr. Valora arrived with fresh scans from 5 star systems and the same diagnosis wrapped in gentler language. No change, no hope, no known cure. 4 floors below, Marcus cleaned the same corridor with deliberate slowness, half hoping, half dreading another glimpse of cobalt and starlight. Kyla, meanwhile, had begun mapping the tower's hidden symphony. She discovered that different materials rang at different frequencies. Metal doorframes sang pure, clear notes, marble walls offered complex harmonics, living beings left lingering chords of emotion like fingerprints in light. And one presence, human, carried a chord of sorrow laced with unbreakable gentleness that made her heart race every time it passed beneath her feet. One afternoon she slipped away from her etiquette tutor, rode the service lift down to the maintenance deck, and waited on the emergency stairs, small legs dangling over the edge like a lost princess in a tower built upside down. When Marcus emerged with his drone, she was simply there, expensive sapphire dress pooling around her like spilled starlight. He knelt at once. "Hello again, little one." Kyla's face lit with fierce recognition. She walked forward, movements careful but determined, and took both his hands in hers. The instant skin met skin, the universe inhaled. For Kyla, the static of a lifetime suddenly resolved into color and texture and depth. Through Marcus's touch, she tasted the salt of tears shed in a hospital room half a galaxy away, felt the infinite care with which he had bathed fevered skin, and read stories by flashlight until the monitors went quiet. She felt loneliness, yes, but also a love so fierce it had outlived death itself and was looking for somewhere new to land. And Marcus, for the first time since the night Jonah's hand went slack in his, felt that small hand again. Only this time it was cobalt and warm and very much alive. Through Kyla he sensed the tower's hidden music, the thrum of power conduits like distant thunder, the bright clear note of a child who had never been broken, only different. "You hear everything," he whispered, tears falling unashamed onto the stairwell floor. "You were never missing anything. You were just listening on a frequency the rest of us forgot existed." Kyla couldn't catch the words, but she caught their meaning perfectly. Felt them settle inside her like the final piece of a puzzle she had been carrying all her life. She tugged him gently toward a quiet alcove where the cameras did not quite reach, and began to teach him her language of vibration and light. Marcus, remembering nights when only presence had been medicine, placed his hands gently on either side of her face, thumbs resting at her temples, and did something no medical journal had ever prepared him for. He did not try to fix her. He simply shared what sound had meant to him. The memory of Jonah's laughter echoing down a hospital corridor, wind in terrestrial pine trees, his wife's voice singing an old Chinese lullaby in a language now half forgotten. He shared the essence rather than the mechanics, love translated into pure intention. And in that sharing something medical science had declared impossible happened. Neural pathways that had never existed until this moment flared into life. Kyla heard her own heartbeat, clear and strong and undeniably real, translated through channels love had just invented. Her eyes flew wide. A small wondering gasp escaped her lips, the first vocal sound she had ever made, soft as moth wings yet loud enough to shatter every certainty in the galaxy. Footsteps thundered on the stairs above. Zixathra burst into the alcove, summoned by a frantic tutor who had finally noticed her charge missing, and stopped as though a plasma bolt had struck him mid-stride. Kyla sat cross-legged before the human janitor, his hands still cradling her face with infinite care. Her expression held a joy so pure it rewrote the air around them, rewrote the very concept of possibility. "Kyla," Zixathra managed, voice cracking like glacier ice. "Get away from my daughter now," he ordered, but the command lacked force. Wonder had already begun to erode fury. Marcus lowered his hands instantly. "Sir, I can explain." But Kyla was already moving, placing herself between them like a tiny cobalt shield, hands flying in urgent signs too fast for any translator to follow. "She's trying to tell you something," Marcus said softly. "Something incredible just happened." Zixathra watched his daughter sign with desperate speed, words about music inside her head, about finally understanding what the wind chimes had been trying to say for 6 long years. Slowly, trembling, Zixathra knelt. Kyla took his larger hand and pressed it over her heart, then guided his other to Marcus's wrist, completing the circle. In that triad of touch Zixathra felt it. The bright clear peal of his daughter's heartbeat translated into something he could almost hear, the warmth of a human grief that had chosen to become a bridge instead of a tomb. "This cannot be real," he whispered, silver tears sliding down cobalt cheeks. "Some things are too real for scanners," Marcus answered. "They only show up when hearts decide to speak the same language." Dr. Valora arrived minutes later, scanners whirring, tentacles stiff with disbelief as dormant neural clusters lit up like sunrise across her readouts. Within hours the story became legend whispered in medical channels from core to rim. Within days requests flooded in: study the child, replicate the phenomenon, secure it for military application. Instant empathic communication across species barriers would revolutionize interrogation, diplomacy, warfare. Zixathra Voss did what any parent with unlimited resources and a suddenly awakened conscience would do. He bought time, then he built a future no government could touch. The Starbridge Foundation was chartered on 3 neutral worlds beyond any single jurisdiction, funded by a trust large enough to buy small star systems. Dr. Valora became Chief Medical Officer. Marcus Chen, former janitor, was named Director of Empathic Resonance Studies with a salary that made him blink twice. Kyla Voss, age 6, was listed as founding partner with full veto rights over any experiment involving her person or any other child. Children arrived from every corner of space: a boy who tasted colors as flavors, a girl who spoke fluent mathematics and dance, twins who finished each other's dreams, a young Andromedan whose synesthesia let him sculpt living equations in mid-air, all of them once labeled defective, dangerous, or doomed. Kyla greeted each one with open hands and the quiet certainty that different was not less. 10 years later the grand concourse of the Galactic Assembly shimmered with delegates from 1,000 worlds wearing translator crowns that suddenly seemed primitive. At the podium stood Kyla Voss, 16 cycles old, cobalt skin now traced with the luminous silver glyphs of adulthood, voice clear and steady through the quantum lattice she and Marcus had designed together. The motion to recognize neurological diversity as protected evolutionary variants passes unanimously, the chair declared, and the chamber erupted in a wave of sound Kyla felt as warm rain against her skin. Crime had fallen 70% on worlds with Starbridge campuses. Innovation had exploded. Most remarkably, wars had quieted wherever empathic bridge programs existed because it turned out understanding was the ultimate disarmament. Kyla's golden gaze found Marcus in the gallery, silver-haired now but smiling like sunrise after the longest night. "We were never broken," she said, and every delegate felt the words in whatever way their hearts heard best, some as sound, some as light, some as the sudden absence of old fear. "We were simply the first notes of a song the galaxy was finally ready to learn." Later, under alien stars that looked almost like the ones above the hospital where Jonah had lived his entire life, Marcus stood beside Zixathra watching children of a dozen species chase fire moths through gardens that sang in frequencies everyone could share at last. "You gave me my daughter," Zixathra said quietly, silver tears catching the light of 3 moons. "No," Marcus replied, feeling Jonah's laughter in the wind that moved through alien trees. "She gave us the future. We just had the privilege of listening." Far above, the Starbridge Foundation's towers glowed softly with the heartbeat of thousands of children learning that the universe had never needed them to be normal, only brave enough to be themselves. And somewhere in the quantum foam between heartbeats, a little boy who never got to grow up smiled, knowing his father's love had become the bridge that taught an entire galaxy how to hear with its soul. The symphony of souls played on, each unique voice adding irreplaceable beauty to the infinite song of existence itself, and the galaxy, for the first time in recorded history, began to listen.